The atmosphere on the roof was low, to put it lightly, as everyone seemed to be drained of whatever hope they had when they headed to the roof. Even the reveal of Namra's powers had been overshadowed by their current situation. They had been hesitant to relax at first as they guarded the door with all weapons at the ready, waiting to see if Gwenom came through, but he never did. They hoped they had gotten rid of him for good. Namra still sat alone with Suhyeok a short distance from her, watching her closely. He had wanted to get closer, but she had told him to keep his distance for the moment. Na-Yeon sat with Cheong-san against a chimney with her fingers laced. She had been very clingy since their daring escape, but he didn't seem to mind. Dae-soo and Woo-jin sat with the others spread out but still close together. An-jo sat watching everyone closely, especially Suhyeok and Cheong-san. He seemed so different at the moment. They had managed to grab as much food as they could carry without slowing them down before they headed to the roof, but she knew that eventually, they would have to go down for more. They could hear the zombies on the ground floor, and the first time they stepped onto the roof and glanced out, they felt their spirits crushed. There were so many of them, what looked like thousands, and judging by how that helicopter kept going and going till it faded into the distance and didn't head for the city, they could only guess it was gone. Their worst fear had been true, that this was the world now, and the thousands of snarling zombies on the school fields were the future. No one had said anything, but they had felt the hopelessness thicken in the air. Na-Yeon hoped her dad was doing okay, even her mom, because no matter how much she hated her, she still wanted her to be okay. Cheong-san chose to do his best not to think about it. At least not until they were safe could he cry for his mother. Knowing his mom, Cheong-san knew that if she was alive she would have tried her best to come and reach him. His dad had always teased her that she should have been the hero and he could manage the restaurant, but he knew right now the world wasn't a place for heroes. Cheong-san didn't know how to speak with An-jo at the moment, as he didn't know if he had lost a friend after hinting at the feelings he had for her. But as he felt Na-Yeon rest her head on his shoulder, those worries seemed to fade. They had rebuilt the SOS after it had been blown apart by the helicopter landing, something they hadn't spoken about much. None of them wanted to think that someone had purposely locked them out. Dae-soo had pointed out the smoke that had risen from some of the lower classrooms, and they could only guess it was another person meeting their end. "We should play a game," Dae-soo said to no one, but everyone heard him after he said it. He looked around, giving a shoulder shrug. "I mean, do you just want to sit here mopping in what could be our last moments?" Woo-jin punched him in the arm and glared at him. "What I'm just saying." Suhyeok looked around the group. Everyone was keeping to themselves, not even glancing up from the ground. "Yes, let's play a game," he said, surprising even Namra, and she turned to look at him, but he only looked her way with a smile. He moved to sit with Dae-soo and the others. It was starting to get dark and getting colder. They had grabbed some blankets from the storage room, but they still wanted more warmth. "If only we had a fire or something," Junyoung said. "I can make one," said An-jo as she sat next to the group. "My dad taught me how to make one," and after helping her gather the relevant materials, they waited anxiously as she did her best to ignite it, and she succeeded, much to everyone's relief, and they soon found themselves huddled around the fire. Even Na-Yeon and Cheong-san had moved closer to the fire, especially after some convincing from Cheong-san. Na-Yeon was still very hesitant to get close to the others in the group, mostly because she thought that she didn't deserve them being nice to her. But Cheong-san had dragged her to the fire regardless, and as they sat down, all eyes momentarily glanced at them before looking back at the fire. It was understandable why though, because with everything happening around them, they had really stopped caring about what was going on between Cheong-san and Na-Yeon, especially if these were their last moments. "Let's play a game of truth or dare, maybe just truth," Dae-soo said as he looked over at the group. "I mean, we might die tomorrow, might as well put everything out there." I don't want to die with regrets. He said the last part soberly and everyone knew the weight of what he was saying. They could talk about the things they had never talked with people about, things they were scared to talk with them about because they most likely would not make it anyway. I'll start. I like horror, Dae-soo said, much to the gasp of everyone before he received a smack to the back of the head from Woo-jin. You better not be talking about my sister. This immediately caused the rest of the group to burst out laughing as the two started shouting at each other, with Dae-soo stating why he would be a good brother-in-law and Woo-jin not wanting to hear any of it. They could all feel some of the tension that was reaching breaking point before faded at the two friends bickering, and slowly but surely even around the group started sharing stuff that they never wanted to speak about. Namra had been asked and the group had expected her to just ignore them, but she had surprised them as she started speaking. I wish I could talk to people more easily, but I don't know how. Everyone seems to have it figured out but I don't. She had looked around the ground before her eyes landed on Soo-hyuk. I don't know how things are done, so I end up not doing anything because I'm scared to mess things up. Namra said each sentence with heavy emotion, not once breaking her eye contact with Soo-hyuk. Everyone in the group could tell it was meant for him. Onjo just felt her chances further slipping away. She knew they had grown up together but she was hoping to at least have a shot. Soo-hyuk had been asked his one and he had remarked that it seemed small compared to the others, but they had asked him to tell it regardless. He talked about how he hates having expectations placed on him but he doesn't know what else to do. Everything in his life seemed already laid out for him, that when he wanted something for himself it always seemed out of reach. He said, glancing at Namra in silent understanding. Onjo had talked about how she felt about her father, and how she wished she told him more about how much she cared for him. She knew his job was risky but never left time for it. Onjo didn't want to say anything about her feelings for Soo-hyuk, especially after both his and Namra's confessions. She didn't want to speak about Cheong-san because she really did see him as a friend and she didn't know if she would be losing one addressing it. It already felt like that, because seeing him as such would take a lot, and now he was with Na-Yeon and that left her confused. The line of confessions went around in a circle till it came to Cheong-san. He looked around the group nervously, glancing at Onjo and then at Na-Yeon, who gave him a small smile. Well, I don't really have anything. But, he took a deep breath. I always tell my mom I don't want to run the restaurant, but there are many reasons why I thought in order to get someone's attention I needed to be more, because I didn't stand out enough for them to notice me. He was speaking vaguely but everyone in the group knew who he was speaking about, even Onjo, but she couldn't get over seeing him as only a friend, and now that friendship was under threat after he revealed these feelings. But another reason was, because I didn't want to mess it up, he said with a huff as he tightened his grip on Na-Yeon's fingers slightly. They both worked so hard for it, but I think I would mess it up because I don't think I'm worth it. I'm a nobody after all. He said the last part with a sad smile on his face. How he would give anything to be hounded by his mom on chicken right now. He knew even his parents didn't want him to work there and they wanted more, but he thought he could be satisfied with that. He felt a squeeze on his hand and looked up at Na-Yeon, who only gave him a small smile that sent some relief through him. It was now Na-Yeon's turn and she looked around. She hadn't thought they would actually count her. She thought they would just skip her and ignore, but the looks they were giving her told her they were anxiously waiting for her answer. Well, she stopped. She was nervous, to say the least. All these people had called her monster and she was one. Go on, an unexpected voice said as Onjo locked eyes with the girl, and with a subtle squeeze on her hand from Cheong-san she gathered the crowd to go on. I have always been lonely. Everyone really never gave me a chance to just be myself. I was always the rich kid expected to be a bratty snob. And with time I started living up to people's words, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I lashed out because it was the only way I knew how to defend myself. If I was right, people would stand with me, they would listen. Because I was right. Na-Yeon could feel the tears flowing down her face. It never made what I did right, and it never will, she said, looking around at the ground. But I hope one day you can all find it in your hearts to forgive me. She felt herself crumbling under the gaze as she quickly stood up and moved away from the fire to sit behind one of the air conditioning units out of sight, but they could still hear her muffled sobs. They all looked at each other, not knowing what to say, before Cheong-san got up and went to her. That seemed to be the end of the game, as everyone was now uncomfortable. But they had done it, they had got everything out there. They felt a great weight lift off them and another swiftly placed by Na-Yeon's confession. Cheong-san found Na-Yeon behind the air conditioning units, frantically trying to dry her tears. "Is that you, Cheong-san?" she asked, but she already knew the answer. Who else would come after her? She turned to face him, seeing his expression blank in a way that she had learned he did when he was deep in thought. "I forgive you," he said, which surprised her, and she looked at him bewildered. She had thought she heard that from him one of their late nights, and she had just brushed it off as her hearing things. But now here he was saying he forgave her for something that had only happened a few days ago. She felt herself let out a choked sob before she felt his embrace around her as he kept whispering it to her again and again. She doesn't remember what happened as she fell asleep in his arms.